Kia ora tātou, we'd like to welcome you to our Zui on the role of apologies in restorative conversations. I'm going to start with a karakia me karakia tātou. Nā mihi o te rā, ki te whānau I hui hui nei, kia tau te rangi mari e, kia whakutapua tātou me nā mea, e wakapono ana tātou, haumi e hui e, tai ki e. So basically we're saying greetings of the day to all the whānau who are gathered here. Let peace be with us and may we respect each other and what we believe. Let us begin. Cath.
Kia ora tātou. So called Cath Forster Takawengoa. However, where I hail from, this is my my pepeha. So ko Manawatu te awa, ko Tararua, nā taua, aua te airehe mua waka. Ko Campbell te iwi, ko Campbell te hapu, ko Cath Forster Takawengoa. So I hail from the mighty Manawatu in New Zealand. My river is the Manawatu River. My mountain range is the Tararua Range. My Campbell is my full family name. However, I am married and my full name is Cath Forster. So kia ora to you all. This is my whānau, as you see here in the photos. My husband is a primary school teacher. My eldest daughter is an intermediate school teacher of year 7 and 8 students. My son, my middle son, is a teacher aide for students coming back into school after quite some considerable time out. And my youngest daughter is within education at Otago University. I sit in the restorative practice space at Waikato University, but prior to that have been a secondary school teacher for the last 30 years. So kia ora.
Ko motopohi toko manga ko te ara o ki watatai, ko uruaro toku waka, ko kaitahu toku iwi, ko te rauaroha toku marae, no o tūtahia hou me te whanganui tēnei wā, ko Joe Chamberlain toku ingoa. Kia ora tātou, kia ora to all who have joined us for this hui. I'm Joe. I hail from my tipuna. My ancestors arrived in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and they hail at the very bottom of the South Island. That's where they came from, arriving here on a Uraro waka. My iwi is Kaitahu, which belongs to Te Waipunamu, the South Island. In my photo here, like Cath, I'm referencing my whānau. I have 4 children, none of which went into teaching. And my tāna there, my husband, Rob, and the only thing at home that runs out now when I come home is my dog. My children have grown and left home. I, like Cath, have a background in teaching in the primary school sector. And also, like my colleague Cath, have a place in the Restorative Practice Team, Te Whai Toi Tangata at the University of Waikato, where we had a little problem coming right back. Who is it? Oh no, might not be. I can edit it. It is. I'll just leave my phone off. It's gonna work. Yes, I think.
No. Yeah, Katie. We love you.
And I'm going to just edit this out.
See you in half an hour.
And then we're fine. And Cath and I are colleagues in the Restorative Practice Team, and we get to work in kura across Aotearoa New Zealand as restorative practice facilitators. And one of the things we're really passionate about is the role of an apology in a restorative conversation.
So we're in this space today to talk about what does an apology look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? So the question that we're posing to start this is to think of a time when someone apologized to you. What were some of the emotions that you experienced when you were sitting in that space?
And I think for me, one of those emotions would definitely be a sense of fear about what was going to be said. Because I think when you've been apologised to, there has been what we call mai or hurt that's been suffered. And so when you enter into that conversation with that person, there's a chance that you're going to be re-hurt. So a little bit of fear and trepidation about what's going to be said. That would be for me, Cath.
Yeah, hesitation. That actually, when you're sitting in that space, you want to run away because actually you don't want that to happen again from what happened previous. So, yeah.
And I think one of the role of facilitating a restorative conversation is helping people before the conversation happens to think about what emotions they might experience and to support those who are bringing together in a way to be able to manage those emotions and to support them by the choice of venue, by the choice of timing, by how we brought those people together into that space, to make sure that we have, as facilitators, already thought about the emotions that might be present and how they're going to be managed.
So then we sit in the opposite space. Think of a time when you had to apologize over something. So actually you're sitting in the other seat. What were some of the emotions that you were experiencing in that space? And what support do you think our ākonga, our students, need with these feelings?
And I think sometimes when we don't or haven't prepared our students or those who are going to be part of the conversation to think about their feelings as they come into that space and the other person's feelings, then we've actually set ourselves up not to be able to manage that space in a healing way. I know when you're going to give an apology, there's that you have to be incredibly vulnerable to own your own hurt, to own what you've done, to own, to be accountable. You have to lay yourself out there and you don't know how it's going to be received. So there's a lot of vulnerability in that moment. And so how do we support those that we're working with in the conversation to be prepared for those feelings so that they don't get overwhelmed on the day?
And I think it's about preparing not just in words, it's actually preparing for, actually it's okay not to look at the person when you're saying this. So we need to do it in a culturally responsive manner on how do we actually sit in front of this person or side on to this person, and how do we deal with this? Do we have to look at them and prepare them for looking straight at them, or are they allowed to look at the ground that's just in front of them in that space so that they know that actually that person is being addressed at the time?
And in Aotearoa New Zealand, we have many different cultures who are present and who may be inside a restorative conversation. You may have Pacifica, you may have Māori, you may have Asian cultures represented, and being aware of those, the needs within each culture and how apologies are expressed within each culture is a really important role of the facilitator in managing that going forward. Like you said, for many of our cultures, it is actually a lack of mana, a lack of respect to look another person in the eye. So by bowing my head, I'm showing respect. Whereas for some other cultures, looking the person straight in the eye is the manner of respect. So it's managing a lot of those things that are happening in the moment. So Cath, what would make an apology go badly?
Yeah, lots of things really.
Yeah.
And I know that if I'm sitting in that space, there's a lot of things that I'm thinking that I want to hear. I'm thinking that I want to see, and I want to look at what it looks like going forward. So yeah, it's quite an interesting space to actually sit in, and that's something we're going to have a look at over the next little while in the talk that we're giving today. So have a think about this. Have you ever received an apology that made you feel worse?
Yeah, and I know that's happened to me in a hui where someone apologised for something they said and I was left feeling more victimised than I had before they'd said it. So we all might have had those experiences, and we're going to highlight why that sometimes can happen. So what is the essence of a good apology?
Well, good question, because actually we're going to have a look at that as we go through. And I think there's different parts that we need to consider when we're looking at a good apology. For example, we don't bring up the other person's bad behavior. It's about us and the space that we're sitting in. It focuses on expressing responsibility for our part and the whole reason why we're here today, and the remorse on our part for the space that we were in at that particular point in time.
And I think we can't bring those two people together till those two things are truly owned. Yeah.
Yes. But it could be over time as well.
Yeah. So Harriet Lerner wrote a book called Why Won't You Apologise? And if you haven't read it or listened to her unpacking that book on a podcast with Brene Brown, we really encourage you to do it as part of this work. And she said, if only our passion to understand others were as great as our passion to be understood, were this so, all our apologies would be truly meaningful and healing. And so a key part of being restorative facilitators is that restoration and healing and bringing about the opportunity for healing to begin, because sometimes an apology is just the beginning, isn't it? It's not the whole thing going forward.
In fact, it's what happens also after that apology.
Yeah.
So have a look at some of the apologies we just thought we'd put before you today. And we might just talk about them really briefly. So yeah, here's our first one. I'm sorry that your behaviour caused me to act out of character. You should work on that.
Yeah, because often what we find in the media as representations is that apologies are poked fun at or mocked or made to seem less genuine. And I think we often have drafted our kids into this kind of response by teaching them very early to say sorry as a get out of jail free card. Say sorry and it's over. Oh, I said sorry. And now the way we've taught our kids, students, people we work with to say sorry is sometimes less meaningful because they jump to it. Sorry, in many different ways. So here's some examples of an apology that doesn't go so well.
Look at this one.
Yeah. Or,
sorry for whatever I said or did last night.
Yeah. And so you can see that even in the media and merchandise around us, sorry has become a really watered down word. Oh, I'm sorry I slapped you, but it seemed like you never stopped talking and I panicked. So made a lot of jokes of. Or in this example.
I love that one. That's similar to what I've struck while I've been teaching over the years.
So we need to really think about an apology, because an insincere apology is actually an opportunity to cause more harm. And one of our first rules as restorative facilitators is that no more harm is caused, and the needs of those involved in a restorative conversation are met. So if those two things are to be present and we should be lay a platform that true healing can begin and restoration, then we need to make sure that the apology is not insincere. If you haven't heard an insincere apology and an apology that caused more harm, we're going to share some with you. Cath, look, I'm really sorry that I was late with the report, Cath, but you know, with my workload, you can't really expect me to get these things in on time.
Thanks. So when we hear the word but, guess where that takes us? It takes us to the actually I'm excusing myself, and actually I want you to hear my excuse. So are they really actually sorry?
Or taking responsibility? Yeah, no accountability. Everything after the but is actually what they want you to hear. Look, I'm sorry. I saw last night that you got a little bit upset at the staff meeting when I made that joke. I'm sorry if it offended you, Cath.
Yeah, thanks. So the word if, when it sits in there, can make the person that you're apologising to feel like it's their own fault or that it's never happened. The pesky two-letter word, if, can come across quite condescending or patronising or even invalidating to the other person, and might seem like you're accusing them or having thin skin. For them having thin skin, none of which have place in a true apology.
Oh, look, Cath, you know, when we were talking yesterday about homelessness, I didn't realise that was such a sensitive issue for you. I'm sorry that, you know, we didn't understand that you were so sensitive about that.
Yeah, and you know, those keywords for you is sometimes quite a place that we actually sit in when we're sitting in an apology, and it's basically sitting in a space where it says, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry that what I said or did made you upset. there's no accountability on the person that's actually saying it. You're saying in effect, I'm sorry you reacted the way that you did to my perfectly reasonable behavior. So the genuine apology focuses, remember, only on our wrongdoing and not on the other person's response.
Yeah, Cath, look, I know things got really heated in the staff meeting yesterday, and that I was yelling, and I'd like to apologise for that, but I'd also like to hear you apologise for not listening.
Yeah, thanks. So actually they're asking the other person to sit in the same space that they're in, and to say that actually the other person had the same bad behaviour, which actually is trying to help them balance up their behaviour. So, so we automatically want to bring up their crime sheet, and how fair is that? I'd like to share, for my part in the problem, actually should be more than 50% of the conversation, because actually we're owning our own behaviour in that apology. And so we shouldn't be calculating the other person's position of responsibility in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get into difficulty when the person says, I will apologise as long as I hear an apology from them. And that's part of this bargaining going on in a conversation. Well, I need to hear an apology too. And so as facilitators, we need to know what those needs are and to be able to talk through them. That an apology is not reciprocity. Just because I apologise doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to hear an apology. It may be what I've been asked for, but it may not be what I get. But so my apology just has to own my part. And we have to facilitate that going forward into a conversation as well.
Yeah, yeah. What about this? I apologise, so let's just drop it already. I've heard you, you've come to me, I've apologised. So come on, let's move on.
Yeah, and so often when people said, I said sorry, what else do you want? And so sometimes the person may bring it up. Just because you've received an apology doesn't mean that's where the conversation or the process ends. An apology is a good start, but they may actually need to come back to that conversation again in order to explore something else that's happened, or in order to talk about how they felt about that. But having the door shut on that is like being shut, you're feeling shut in. And as long as that my stays there, we can't move forward, because the healing that's needed to, the person doesn't feel they've been heard. And we talked before about it's necessary to feel seen and heard in a genuine apology. So they haven't felt that their pain to the depth that they want to has been shared. And if you shut the door and said, I've said sorry, then I can't actually, it stops me going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What about this one? I'm really sorry about what he did. I wasn't in that space. You need to remember that, but I'm really sorry for what he did.
Yeah, nah, as we say in New Zealand, yeah, nah. Because what's happening there is Cath is apologising on behalf of somebody else. And that's not a genuine apology. You cannot apologise for someone else, because how can you apologise for someone else if they haven't accepted responsibility or given an expression of remorse?
So the essence is the wrong person is apologising in this space.
Oh, Cath, I'm really sorry. I know I was supposed to meet you at 2 o'clock yesterday, but things just got so out of hand, and you would have just been standing there, and it's terrible. I'm so sorry. You know, I really feel sorry, and I just need you to you know I'm not this person. You know that's not what happens.
Thanks, Jo.
Yeah, but you do know I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now what can I do? So therefore, and what am I hearing here? Because I feel like it's just stopped the conversation. And the conversation was all around actually taking ownership for our actions. And it's actually stopped that conversation. And in fact, the second person has had to give reassurance to the first person rather than hear what the situation was and the responsibility that they are going to take. They're over apologising.
Yeah.
So it focuses on the response of the person making the apology rather than on the person that was harmed. So you're not actually coming to me and saying, I'm really sorry for what I've put you through and this is what happened for you. You're actually saying, oh no, yeah, it's all about me, it's all about me, look at me, look at me.
But I'm dreadfully sorry.
Oh, thanks, Jo.
Yeah. So when we hear these apologies, we know that they are sometimes, if that's what's awash in our media and that's what our students and people around us are hearing, when we say to somebody, you'll need to apologise, there are a lot of things that they can have in their head with those words that they may bring into a conversation that we don't actually want to be there as facilitators. And here's a form that was given out at a school where the students just ticked things that they were feeling. So I'm really sorry that I yelled in class yesterday, but I was traumatised in my childhood. I didn't know better. I wanted to be naughty, but now you realise, Miss Forster, that this note represents my actions, words, and behaviour may, in fact, in some way have hurt or upset you, but you know, I won't do it again. Signed.
And do we actually want to put words in the person's mouth to actually help them to get through this, or actually excuse their behaviour by ticking a box that's actually there on the page? So yeah, we wanted to put this because for us, we consider this to be quite a light-hearted form that you could use to actually help you get through the day when you're sitting in the not box of the social discipline window. But so we thought we'd show you this just as something light and breezy to move on through.
So we know that there are 3 phases of a restorative. PB4L is the umbrella that we work under here in Aotearoa New Zealand. And we know that for us, we have 3 phases in our restorative conversations: the phase of preparation, participation, and follow-up. And this is adapted from Jensen and Matler, Rich and Greg, who are part of our team. So a lot of what we're talking about today is in the preparation phase, that first phase when we're talking to people about coming together, sometimes for what we call a high-level hui, or when we're exploring quite a depth of harm. We need to prepare those for the fact that, would you like an apology? Does that meet your need? If you wish to give an apology, what might you be wanting to say? And in that preparation phase, starting to weed out some of these ifs, buts, offended, these other words that are going to get in the way. So if we're going to give an apology in that preparation phase, we have to make sure before we bring our people into the room to participate in a restorative conversation, no matter what their age, that we have prepared them to receive an apology. If Cath says, yes, I would like to hear an apology, then I always have to say, okay, what are some of the things that you might be listening for, Cath, in that apology? Because as the facilitator, I need to be in the preparation phase working through that. And I think what we found is that it's no good waiting for harm to be caused to practice these things, that the best day, as we say, a blue sky day, the best day to work with students in practicing apologies is when they don't need to give one. And that it should be a social skill that we're teaching. And we were really heartened to see that one of the other presenters in the RJ World Conference is talking about using drama with people to practice apologies so that they get to both receive them and practice giving them. And that also helps with the emotion. So in that preparation phase, participation phase is where the apology might be delivered, or it might be part of a follow-up. And that's when we were talking about apologies with legs on, wasn't it, Cath?
Yeah, so the actions that need to take place alongside the words that are given, which actually shows a way forward and how important that is for the person that's been harmed to actually be able to be on the receiving end of actually seeing those actions going forward, and how important that is for both participants or both groups, both parties involved in that restorative.
And reflecting back on managing the emotion in that space, helping people to work through what they might be feeling, what the other person might be feeling, what they need to hear, what they need to say. All that is part of our role as facilitators, if an apology is what's desired to meet the need. This is a quote from Harriet Lerner.
Yeah, I really like it because we need to once again actually listen, and that's where it sits within the restorative, to actually be able to listen to each other and be in that space of actually listening is when it is right and appropriate for that meeting to take place, for that space where actually we can work through the process with both parties.
Because if I haven't, and I think that's why, although I might have prepared an apology, until I've actually sat in the space and listened to Cath, I won't actually know fully what I am going to apologise for until I have listened and experienced her view of her hurt. And I've really sat with that and sat in the moment with it. That's what, I can't have an apology pre-written in some ways before I've heard that, but we can do some work around what an apology isn't, so that if there becomes a moment where an apology would seem the right thing to do, we can have prepared prepared the people in the hui to share that apology. But it can't be done really until I've truly listened and felt and sat in that moment.
Yeah, so that affect that sits within that restorative work is really, really important. And for our students within education, actually it's a real learning and turning point within the restorative. But we do need to prepare them to actually be in that space.
And to manage their emotion as they're hearing those things too. Because they can get into wakama, which is the word for shame, and start to feel, oh, I did all this and I caused all this. How am I ever going to move forward? So a good apology. What makes a good apology, Cath?
So I think it's these points that sit here on our screen. And it's one thing that a few years ago, I was sitting at an RJI conference, actually, that Chris Marshall presented. And listening to Chris Marshall, it was just beautiful, and set me in that space of, actually, I need to go back into school, and this is the work that we can do within our school community. So good practice requires good preparation of both parties, which is exactly what we've just talked about. And then sitting in with what apology is required. So what does that look like for the person that's actually going to be giving it, but also for the person that's going to be receiving it? Is it reciprocal? And I think that's the space that we're talking about. Is it reciprocal for both parties? What's the timing of the apology? And that comes out of the preparation that we actually know is important, but also where it sits within that process of restorative. Let's not jump to the apology too quickly in the process, but actually wait to hear the affect within that space. So actually the apology actually builds space, momentum, and just brings about what both parties need at the end of it. Now, through this, it needs to happen at a time that reflects the person's that's been harmed needs. And so that's what we needed to bring to you today.
If not the words, I'm sorry, what do they need? Like, it's not always those words that's going to fix things, is it?
No, and you know, in some spaces that I've sat in, actually some families, some cultures don't actually use the words I'm sorry. They just use the words, this is what it looks like moving on. I know that in this space you were hurt, but this is what it looks like moving on. And so it's all about making the relationship safe again. And so as long as that recognition is given, actually it's the moving on space. And so
the moving forward. Yeah.
I've got some students and some whānau actually that wouldn't use the word sorry.
Yeah.
They just drop it for 3 months and expect that when they come back in, they can just move on. But actually it's addressing the needs of what both parties need to actually move forward. Yeah,
and I noticed that you're wearing your pounamu, your taonga from your whānau around your neck there, Cath, and it reminds me of a hui where our family actually bought pounamu to gift to the hurt party. And that was their way. So an apology doesn't always look like words. An apology can sometimes look like a gift or restitution made in other ways, but can be received in the same way as the words.
Yes.
And so they had gifted and bought this taonga, this piece of pounamu, which they placed on the middle of the meeting, and it was received by the other family. And as an acknowledgement of harm and the harm caused, and also as reparation.
Yes.
So that they could move forward, and was accepted, but again worked through in the preparation phase of, if they offered this, would you be willing to accept it, so that no more harm was caused. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been very significant. So the next part is, so when is an apology needed and when isn't it needed? So Jo.
So I think when an apology, that's working it out so that no more harm is caused because of the other person hasn't wanted to hear an apology. If the timing is rushed and an apology is given when it isn't, I'm not ready to receive it. Talk to the hand. I'm not ready to hear it, and I have communicated with you as a facilitator, and yet the other person wants to offer it. They are offering it to meet their own need, not to meet my need. And then that can cause more harm. So we really need to think about, when isn't it needed? Maybe there's another way that both parties are committed to move forward. And so the words "I'm sorry" may not be needed or necessary, or the incorrect step for that time.
So it can also repair the disconnection after having made a mistake or acted really badly. That's where Harriet Lerner sits in the space of, actually it repairs the disconnection. And we know that. We know that a restorative does repair the disconnection. And that apology that is said in that space that recognises both parties, but also recognises the hurt, can bring about that.
And Luna says, we strengthen our relationships one apology at a time. When we show the other person that we care about their feelings, that our empathy and remorse are genuine, and which is the legs on, that we'll do our best to ensure that there will be no repeat performance. And sometimes we need to see an apology rather than hear it.
Yeah, so when you're tired of hearing an apology, and we know that some of our staff in our schools say, so what does that mean?
They said sorry yesterday.
Yeah, and how many times do we need to hear that word in order to find some change in that student or change in the situation? So Jo.
So sometimes our students are really quick off the mark with a sorry. Oh, sorry, Miss Forster, for calling out. So they're really quick. And so we use what we call receive and park. So I say, thanks for that apology, Cath, but I'd just like to talk about how that affected some of the people in our class.
Or could we turn that around and say, thanks for that apology. Let's go and hear from some of our students how that hurt them.
Yeah, so it's receiving it so that I have heard that this is what you want to say. But some of our students we like to call the sorry bridge is that they don't actually want to participate in the conversation. They don't want to go through those feelings that we talked about at the beginning of the story that can be quite intense. They don't want to feel remorse. They don't want to feel guilt. They definitely don't want to feel shame for their behaviour. They want to avoid that. And we know Mark Thorsby talks about the compass of shame. They are out of there and they think a quick sorry is going to get them across the process to the other side. But what we need to do is, it's not enough for our students to want to jump the process. We understand why they want to jump the process. As adults, we want to jump the process. And when our younger people who don't have the same self-regulation that some adults have, not all,
And do you think that's because within a school, and I've been a really bad person of this, I haven't shown the follow-up that I said that I would be involved in to actually see the action take place, because actually other priorities got in the way of that priority, and they became more, actually I've got this higher priority right now. Yes. However, that follow-up should have happened, and actually I need to reflect on, did I actually follow through with that? And so then we get back to the next space. Oh, we need another conversation. Oh, we need another conversation. And because our follow-up was actually really, really hard to do.
Yeah, and it then teaches our kids to say stuff, but not do stuff. So that comes to our next point. When you're tired of hearing sorry, what will sorry look like as an action, Cath?
Yes, and I think it needs to be seen as having what we would call legs on. So moving from here, what will we see? What will we hear? How will we feel going forward? And that's what sorry looks like in action.
Yeah. So what do you think for happen? I heard you say sorry about that yesterday, Cath. And here we are again today. What do you think should happen if your sorry doesn't show a change and we see this happening again tomorrow?
Yeah, and I think what I then need to say, actually, I am going to show this.
Yes.
And then that actually creates an action in that space.
Because we need to attach something to the sorry. If we're not hearing genuine remorse and accountability alongside the sorry, then we know that they haven't truly heard or seen our pain or our experience or our anger. They haven't actually sat in that space. They want to quickly just cut and run. And then we're actually coming back to that archway. We're devaluing the whole restorative process because our follow-up of the actions we're going to see and the agreements we made are not pushing forward. And therefore our students are relying on sorry.
So have a look at this, because I think this is quite a profound quote that sits in this space. One of the most profound interactions that can occur between people is that apologies have the power to heal humiliations. It has the power to free the mind from deep-seated guilt, and it has the power to remove the desire for vengeance and ultimately restore broken relationships. And Aaron Lazar says that.
And it's a fantastic tool in our toolbox, but has to be wielded with great care, with thought, with preparation, and to meet the needs of those that are involved in the conversation. The last thing, we like this format for an apology. As we said, teach our students how to apologise. I think many adults haven't had a true course in apologies, which is why we end up with the apologies we have. And Cath and I were talking just as we came into this space today about just recent apologies in the media or that have been over the paper. There was one given by an actor just recently at the Oscars. And when you start to unpack it, you can hear the things that are missing. And so you know that it's not going to work for them as they want it to work. There's a genuine desire to make restitution, but it's not in the right way. So we really need to work with our students, and here's a format.
So whether they're young or old, or older rather, we would say that we need to actually show the responsibility that we have. So we actually need to name the harm that actually we have created. So I'm sorry for, and just finish the sentence. And so often we need to build this, and we know even for our teenagers, we need to actually empower them in communication for actually sitting in front of another person. It was wrong because, or it was harmful because, or I hurt you because, and you actually need to say where that sits. And then it's all about, so next time, what will I do? So that's the action moving forward. But there's also asking the person on the receiving end, so is there anything you need from me right now in this space? Is there any words that I haven't used that actually you need to hear? Is there any actions that you haven't seen that actually I need to give right now, so that I open myself with hands like open wide, just saying, please receive what I have done in this space.
And then responding to that apology, we need to teach our students, our old people and our older people, our people we work with, how to respond. You know, we often say, oh, that's all right. And that's the last thing we actually want to teach our young, very young people. I've heard say that, kids who say sorry, and they say, that's okay. It's like a couplet, a genuine response. Thank you, Cath. I needed to hear that apology. I really am hurt. Or
yeah, or you could go to, so I appreciate your apology. I just need time to think about it. I need to see a change in your actions before I can move forward with you. And that's what we say. It's not all about becoming BFFs or, you know, the real major friends all over again, because actually it's time to rebuild the trust between those two people, that actually when we work together or when we hear each other, we won't be hurting each other.
And that can take time. And it's the beginning of a conversation. It's the beginning of healing, but it's not the point of healing and the only point of healing. And it may not be the only conversation we need to have. And we do have to allow time for both parties to walk away. And we have to prepare the person that they may not hear. Some people think that when I apologize, you must then say, I forgive you, because that's meeting my need in the moment as well. And if they don't hear those words, we don't want them to go away angry or upset by that. But that there is no reciprocity. I am giving you this apology freely because I acknowledge my accountability for my action and I feel genuine remorse. And that's where it needs to end for me, not wanting to hear certain words back.
So thank you. So Joe and I have loved bringing this part, I think, part of what a restorative is all about to you today. And we trust that you've gleaned something out of it that you can actually take away either into your educational space or into your home space. And so, so kia ora and ka kite anō until we meet again from me.
Kia ora whānau out there at RP whānau. We're just really glad to be able to share in this hui of knowledge sharing that's going on at the moment and bring something that we have really truly considered and leaned into, the role of an apology in a restorative conversation, when to give one, when not to give one, and how to give one, that can create a pathway forward to healing and restoration. And as we finish today, we're going to finish with a karakia whakamutanga and bless you as you go about your work. Mi karakia tātou. Kia mutu a mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, aio ki te aorangi. Our work is finished for the time being. Protect us all, our friends, our family, and truly, peace to the universe. Ka kite anō.